The Seahawks are officially 1-0 to open the Mike Macdonald era, but it wasn't without some sloppy play, particularly in the trenches on offense. Is the offensive line already with panic for the Seahawks? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks moving to 1-0 yesterday with a victory over the Denver Broncos, a come-from-behind victory. They were trailing at the half after spotting the Broncos 10 points with miscues on offense and special teams. They were able to overcome those miscues at home, though, and hold on for the 6-point victory. We're going to have our first Monday musings of the regular season, taking a deeper dive into everything that went down yesterday, including the offensive line, the concerns already for that group up front. And we'll be tackling your questions on our Monday mailbag, courtesy of our friends at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks officially have opened the Mike Macdonald era at 1-0, but it was not necessarily the prettiest of wins. As Mike Macdonald said today, hey, a win's a win. We played our game in the second half. They obviously bounced back after a dismal first two quarters, particularly in the offensive side of the football, where the Seahawks spotted the Broncos a bunch of points with two safeties and an interception on the opening drive that led to a field goal. Really put the Broncos out in front with self-inflicted woes. Second half did a much better job of playing within themselves, but really the biggest storyline in that first half, when you're looking at the safeties and you're looking at the interception that Geno Smith threw, there's one common theme with all those plays, Rob, and unfortunately, it's an area that continues to be a concern year in and year out, at least for 1 week. The offensive line, once again, looking like a potential issue. It might already be time to hit the panic button, especially with George Fant potentially missing time now with a knee injury.
Yeah, the Fant injury situation certainly bears watching and perhaps panicking. Obviously, the Seahawks are without Abraham Lucas for a minimum of the first 4 games, and he is, of course, the starter when healthy. George Fant going down. Mike Macdonald was unwilling or unable to give us any kind of real update during Monday's post-game press conference, and so we don't know George Fant's availability for this next week's game against the New England Patriots, which of course is a road game, and so is going to make pass protection that much more difficult. So there is all those reasons for concern. That said, as much as the Seahawks really did struggle in various areas of football in the first half of the game against the Broncos, they did come together in the second half. The rushing yardage was greatly improved. The pass protection was greatly improved. Frankly, I was surprised. I think a lot of Seahawks fans who watched that game would be surprised that the Seahawks only allowed 2 sacks. Now, they gave up 9 tackles for loss, and as you mentioned, with the 2 safeties, certainly there was some pretty woeful play all along the offensive line. I know there's been a great deal of consternation at the guard position. Center Connor Williams, Mike Macdonald gave him some credit, but there were some plays where Connor Williams was beaten as well. And Seattle's offensive tackles also struggled with the Denver Broncos. So I think that this is an offensive line group that looked like a offensive line group that had to gel, that hasn't played much together at all. And so that I wasn't surprised by the early struggles. This is a Denver defensive front that I think is a little bit underrated. So I don't think that this is reason to panic yet. But if George Fant is not back for the Seahawks, if Stone Forsythe is going to be your starter at the right tackle position moving forward, then I do think that there is some reason to be concerned, and it's going to just create a opportunity for the Seahawks offense perhaps to be forced to adjust a little bit earlier than Ryan Grubb was hoping.
Look, at halftime yesterday, I was thinking we might already have to bring out the panic meter because of the injury that George Fant suffered and the fact that across the board, now going back and watching the rewatch, Charles Cross was pretty darn good after the first quarter. The first quarter, he got beat a couple times, but I thought that he looked really good the last three quarters, particularly in the run game, was getting after it. So I felt like Cross played at a pretty high level, but the rest of the offensive line in that first half, it was constant pressure in the backfield. It was constant penetration against the run. They could not get anything going. So I will admit at halftime yesterday, I'm like, I know this is one game, but this is abysmal. Like, this is one of the worst performances I've seen by a Seahawks offensive line in the last 10 years. And that's saying something because we have seen some really bad trench play from Seattle's offense over the years, unfortunately. But Ryan Grubb being one of the key reasons behind this, Scott Huff deserves some credit as well. The offensive line was able to get into more of a rhythm in the second half because of some schematic changes that were made to take advantage of what the Broncos were doing, some adjustments at halftime. And look, if you've ever been in a locker room as a coach or a player, you understand that. And I love that Mike McDonald said this, I believe, after the game yesterday, saying that adjustments are overrated because you only get a couple minutes really to be able to install things. You have to build off the game plan you already have, and you can make some real quick adjustments, but it's not like you can completely rewrite your game plan. So that's not what happened. But the coaching staff was able to get the offensive line in a position where they were able to mix a few things up, and it really got the run game going. The pass protection was a lot better. They cut their pressure rate in half. They gave up a pressure rate of 47% in the first half. It was 23% in the second half. They gave up 2 sacks in the first half, didn't give up a single one in the second half. And we obviously saw how much better the run blocking was. So I'm not even going to explore the panic thing yet here. The only reason to maybe panic is if George Fant is going to be out for an extended period of time. And at this point, we don't know if it's a day-to-day truly, or if they're waiting day-to-day to really know, is this a severe injury or not? And they're just biding their time. We don't know based on Mike McDonald's response today. But I'm not panicking at this point. I think you saw enough in that second half from this line. And you have to remember, Connor Williams was playing his first game coming off a torn ACL. He looked like a guy that had not played in an organized game for a while, the first few drives, and then I thought he really settled down. Anthony Bradford had a rough first half. Second half, I thought Anthony Bradford was one of the catalysts behind that run game getting going. He had some really nice blocks that sprung Ken Walker III, and I thought he was a lot better in pass protection those last 2 quarters. I thought that Stone Forsythe settled down a little bit after really struggling when he first came into the game cold off the bench. So I don't think it is time to panic. I think that this is a group that's going to need some time to mesh. They're going to need some time to gel. But I was encouraged by what I saw in the second half. And the fact that the coaching staff was able to find some ways to get these guys more in a rhythm. And so for me, it's a non-answer here as far as this is panic time. I don't think it is at all.
No, I don't think it's panic time. As I mentioned before, again, with Stone Forsythe's situation, I think that there is concern, certainly, but not panic. I guess I'm going to have to disagree with Mike McDonald. I think that when you are kind of a football savant, the way that McDonald has proven himself to be, at least to this point, then I guess it's easy to say that that adjustments are overrated. Kind of like it's easy for someone who is just physically beautiful or handsome to say, oh, looks are overrated, or somebody who's wealthy to say that money is the root of all evil and all that kind of stuff. The Seahawks have been plagued by an inability, frankly, to make offensive, especially adjustments on the offensive side of the ball for the last several years without throwing any previous play callers and offensive coordinators' names and, them under the bus. But the adjustments that Ryan Grubb and Scott Half made after halftime, Corbin, I thought was brilliant. I mean, without getting too technical for some of our listeners, basically there was an edge rusher for the Denver Broncos, Jonathan Cooper, who led the team in sacks a year ago, that was absolutely wreaking havoc off the edge. And then Zach Allen, who a defensive lineman that the Seahawks tried to sign in free agency a couple of years, who also was absolutely terrorizing the Seahawks up front. Nobody was able to block Zach Allen for much of the game. He only had 2 tackles, but he was absolutely a difference maker in the inside. When the Seahawks came back out in that very first drive and marched right down the field, Ken Walker, of course, punctuated with the touchdown. The Seahawks were allowing Jonathan Cooper to rush outside, and it was just creating this huge rushing lane because he was almost blindly going outside. So Stone Forsythe just let him go there. The right guard, Anthony Bradford, would either pinch down or release to the second level. It created huge running lanes, and then Ken Walker was able just to do the dynamic things that he does on the field all the time. So without getting again, too complicated. I think that it was just an adjustment, recognizing what the Broncos were doing, recognizing the talent the Seahawks have on their offensive line, and instead of panicking, being much more aggressive in the way that they ran the football. And so the easy answer is that if you can't pass protect, then run the heck out of the ball. That's exactly what the Seahawks did. They had 22 yards other than Geno Smith's scramble for the touchdown. That was the only offensive highlight of the first half for the Seahawks. It felt like they, absolutely controlled the line of scrimmage in the second half. And that's why they walked out of that game with the victory.
When we return, we're going to continue with our post-game Monday episode here with a Monday mailbag. We got plenty of questions from you, our valued listeners, and we're looking forward to diving into them. Plenty of game-related questions, some questions about the roster. I'm sure there will be some more offensive lines sprinkled in there. We'll get to those here in a moment on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football game in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. When we get into week 2, I'm hoping that Ken Walker III is going to be healthy enough to eclipse 70.5 rushing yards, and Geno Smith can get over 1.5 touchdown passes in Foxborough. I'm going to be having that on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the PrizePicks app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code Locked On NFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is also sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, I wish I had a little bit more time to paint horror movie models. You can see them normally in my background here on our show. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you as always, whether you're listening in nearby Bonney Lake or if you're over in Providence, Rhode Island, near Patriots country. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you. listening in to the podcast. I am in a hotel right now, so those of you that are watching, you can see that I've got a light that is acting up above me, so my apologies for that. It's certainly going to impact the Chrome Dome. But let's get to our Monday mailbag, shall we? Tons of questions from our valued listeners. And this first one, I think Rob's really going to enjoy, coming from 12 for Life Go Hawks tweets. Am I totally crazy for wanting to extend Tyrel Dodson past his current one-year deal after a single game? His energy on the field and his press availability is awesome. It's totally infectious. I feel like he should be part of the foundation of our new defense. Maybe that's a overreaction Monday or a just right reaction after watching yesterday.
Well, he finished second on the team in total tackles behind Julian Love, who also, of course, had a terrific performance. And I mentioned that not only because of the fact that, again, Love and Dodson, I thought, were two of the real bright spots for the Seahawks on defense. And we talked, so much and deservedly so about the secondary. That's terrific. But there was an awful lot of angst out there among Seahawks fans at the linebacker position. And, there was a certain amount of curiosity when the Seahawks signed Julian Love a couple of years ago, and then after just the 1 year, Seattle, put him on a longer term deal. So there is some precedence here for Seattle to do exactly what the question is about it, possibly extending Tyrel Dodson. Do I think it's going to happen during the regular season? No, of course not. But I have to agree. I thought the physicality, I thought the reliable open field tackling, I thought the just positioning his teammates around him to create great plays, I thought was impressive. I thought the Seattle's open field tackling in general was just terrific, considering how the limitations that you have throughout the training camp and preseason process. So I think the Tyrel Dodson deserves a little bit of a fist bump, and I'm happy that we're able to provide him that after that week 1 performance.
Our second question, coming from Tom Page, tweets, would McClendon Curtis be an upgrade at right tackle? Now, and I'm assuming this question from Tom is based on the fact that George Fant is not going to be playing. This is assuming that George Fant is going to at least miss a game. And I'm going to say yes. I think McClendon Curtis was the better tackle in training camp in the preseason than Stone Forsythe. Do I think that is what the Seahawks are going to do? No. I think Stone Forsythe would be the starter if they're going to be without George Fant for a week or longer. But I'm just saying, from what I saw in training camp and what I saw in the preseason, that I think McClendon Curtis was the superior player of the two. But Forsythe has started a lot more games in the NFL than what McClendon Curtis has. So they're going to go with the guy that has more of an established rep in the National Football League. And I understand that. I think that if George Fant is out, though, you are absolutely going to see McClendon Curtis being one of the elevations from the practice squad next week. At minimum, if it's a significant injury and he ends up on injury reserve, you now have an open roster spot. Curtis gets signed to the regular roster. So I think there's a very good chance that we will see him suiting up either way if George Fant is going to miss any time. Our next question from Weasel Rockin' tweets, will the offense have to shift away from what they had implemented and what we saw in the first half yesterday with how bad the O-line play was? The adjustments made out of the half worked. There's a lot of overreaction to week 1, so maybe it's not as bad as it seems.
Yeah, again, I don't think that it is quite as bad as it seems. I think that we are seeing one of the obvious drawbacks of when you don't have an offensive line that has been playing throughout the preseason together. Losing George Fant early on and Stone Forsythe getting jumped out there, or thrown out there, then just put yourself in an Anthony Bradford situation, let's say at the right guard position. Now you have a brand new right tackle, somebody you're not used to playing with on your right side. You have a brand new center in Conyer Williams on your left side. You have, as I said or argued before, the Denver Broncos, I believe, have a very underrated front. And so all of those factors. So I do think that it is going to perhaps force the Seahawks to adjust their play calling a little bit. I don't think you're going to see the deep passing that, of course, Ryan Grubb and the University of Washington had so much success with in their national title game run a year ago. But at the same time, I think that that is something that Seattle is able to do because they do have greater depth along the offensive line this year. And I would agree with you 100% on the previous question about about McClendon Curtis. As excited as I'm about the upside of Mike Jarrell, for example, obviously he made the roster. McClendon Curtis did not, wasn't even among the very first players that Seattle brought back on the practice squad. But I do believe that McClendon Curtis was the better player in training camp and the preseason games. And I think that he is more ready to actually play in an NFL game than the rookie from Finland.
Pro Comments tweets, which new addition from the offseason had the biggest impact in week one? Well, we just talked a little bit about Tyrell Dodson. I think you could make an argument about him, but I'm going to go to the safety group, and I know that he did not lead the group in tackles, but Rayshon Jenkins yesterday was just bringing the hit sticks, and it was a pleasure to watch. He was coming up and sticking people. He seemed like he was constantly in great position in coverage, and the fact you can play him up in the box, you can blitz him, he can play free safety in a pinch. That's the kind of guy that you need in this defense that Mike Macdonald runs. You've got to have a safety that has that multiplicity, and all three of the main safeties the Seahawks have fit that bill. But I was just really excited on the rewatch what I was seeing from Rayshon Jenkins. This is a player that I just think is a big-time addition. He's underrated, not a superstar, but he's a guy that's a very good starting safety in this league that can play a number of positions. And I just loved the fact that he was one of those catalysts behind that excellent open field tackling. He was coming up and sticking people. This was not a situation where he was making tackles 15 yards downfield. He was coming up at the line of scrimmage, making plays. Julian Love was doing the same thing. But I just think Jenkins, as far as newcomers, really made a statement yesterday. And Kayvon Wallace forced a fumble too. So, I mean, those new safeties came in and they really played some good football yesterday against the Denver Broncos. Jared Bulls 746. It's Jared, not Garrett. I don't think that he'd be messaging us. What was the most impressive part of the final third down conversion? The pass, the catch, or the general play execution? I know, Rob, that you have not had a chance to dive into this. I watched the end zone view of that. And look, I'm going to answer real quick, and I'm going to let you have the mic. But I know the catch was incredible, but I'm going with the pass on this one. That pass was ridiculous.
I think that I'm actually going to go with the third option, just the overall execution. Mike Macdonald did talk about this a little bit in his Monday press conference and just kind of acknowledge that this was all 11 of the Seahawks on the field really performing very well. He actually cited DK Metcalf with the way that he ran his route just to create some space for Tyler Lockett to operate. Obviously, it was an excellent route by Tyler Lockett. Obviously, unbelievable catch, a pristine pass from Geno Smith. Where else could he possibly have put that ball? No way that Tyler Lockett just ho-hum makes one-handed game-winning kind of catches. I mean, that's just the legend that Tyler Lockett is. But I think the pass protection on that as well. Again, it's easy to just kick the Seahawks offensive line when they're down because obviously there was real struggles. I mean, that was one of the jokes that I've been making with people here is it was fortunate that the Seahawks brought in a tag team. Whoop, there it is. And, DJ Cool and let me clear my throat because frankly, the Seahawks offense needed to clear its throat and during halftime. And they needed to have something entertaining to keep the Lumen crowd going because
that might be the first time, Rob, that you've ever said something that completely caught me off guard.
That's the thing. I mean, it was abysmal performance early on, but when the Seahawks needed their pass protection to be good, when they needed to run the ball effectively, they found that. And so again, I think that I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I certainly think that Geno Smith's pass and Tyler Lockett's catch were pristine, but I also thought that the pass protection they got on that particular play when they needed it the most, to me, is one of the most encouraging signs I saw from a game that I think had an awful lot of silver linings to some pretty dark clouds out there.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those games where you had a massive Category 5 hurricane going on in the first half, and then you had some sun in the second half. And so the offense was able to figure out how to get things rolling a little bit. And that pass protection is probably the underrated part here because I know Geno Smith got blasted by a couple of guys, but Denver brought 6. They brought more than Seattle had with their 5-man protection, and they were able to give him enough of a window there that he could get that ball out to Tyler Lockett. Everybody across the board made spectacular plays. Last question here real quick from Joe Murphy on Threads. Who is getting extended first, Boye Mafe or Riq Woolen? Well, right now, neither one of them because they legally cannot. We have to wait till the end of the year. But when we get to the end of the season, it's just one game. Look, I think Devin Witherspoon's presence may have an impact on this. I don't know that Seattle is going to be rushing to get Riq Woolen necessarily re-signed when they, at the edge rushing position, have a chance to get Boye Mafe. But I guess at the same time, Uchenna Nwosu already has a massive deal. So that may impact things. This is a difficult one for me because, look, I want to just say sign them both at the same time, but I know that's not how this situation works. If I was the general manager, to me, the pass rush goes over the corner, personally. And I think Boye Mafe is on the cusp of superstardom. The way that we're seeing him get after guys, the athleticism, and now he's really figuring things out. So that would be the one of the two. But I'm still going to say, get them both paid. Get it done. When we come back, we are going to have our first Monday Musings, really take a deep dive into yesterday's game after watching the All-22. Things that stood out to us in offense, defense, and special teams. Maybe some things we think we know coming out of this game as well. One of our favorite segments of the week. We'll get to it coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a car payment when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and with their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Want to see the Seahawks in their home opener or the road opener next Sunday? In Foxborough, you can get seats at Gillette Stadium in the lower bowl for under $50. Great seats without breaking the budget. Get yourself a cheap airfare and head on over to Foxborough for the second game of the regular season. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event. And with Game Time guarantee, you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, make sure to check out the new Locked On NFL. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows a day. Start off with the madman, Tyler Rowland, kicking things off in the morning with a double shot of NFL Espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And in the Locked On Local Experts, you're going to get unprecedented insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's time for our first Monday Musings of the 2024 season, a deep dive into everything that we saw, things that maybe we think we know now, or questions that we maybe have coming out of the first game, the Seahawks winning 26-20 over the Denver Broncos. Let's start on the offensive side of the football, Rob. And I know there's a number of different directions that we could go with this, but I know there's one topic in particular that you have been itching to talk about since this game ended, and there's a certain coach that you want to give some credit to.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff, just the adjustments that they made, I think that they certainly deserve a great deal of credit. But because I talked about that earlier, let me kind of shift the attention elsewhere. One of the more impressive games I saw on Sunday, besides the Seahawks beating the Broncos, of course, was the Detroit Lions, their overtime victory against the LA Rams. And I mentioned that game because it's always kind of fun to talk about when the Rams lose a game, just as a divisional opponent, and the Seahawks Seahawks, of course, pending whatever happens tonight with San Francisco and the New York Jets. The Seahawks are in first place, and so that's worth celebrating as well. What I wanted to mention, though, is one of the things I was most impressed by with the Detroit Lions is the two-headed monster they have at running back, and David Montgomery and the power that he demonstrated, Jahmyr Gibbs, the electricity that he produces as well. And it got me to thinking about just how lucky the Seahawks are that they also have a two-headed monster at the running back position. When Ken Walker III was not on the field at the end of the game, and they had Zach Charbonnet out there, obviously he caught the touchdown. It wound up being the deciding points in this football game. So I thought that was impressive. And just the power and determination with which he runs, and the same thing with Kenneth Walker. The way that Seattle has a true two-headed monster, the running back position, it is such a incredibly valuable asset to have here. And so, again, we focus so much on Geno Smith and the passing game for obvious reasons, but I really do think it is the balance that the Seahawks have on offense. It's what is going to help them survive when they stub their toe in the first half like they did against the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to gush about the adjustments because going back and watching the All-22, you know the saying, Rob, it's never as good as you think, it's never as bad as you think. No, it was as good as I thought it was. In fact, it was better than I thought it was. And I already thought the adjustments that Ryan Grubb made were fantastic. Like, I was talking about this on the post-game show yesterday, and this is when I'd only seen the TV copy. And then once I got the All-22, Ken Walker III's touchdown run, I'm going to take a very nice, I'm going to, maybe a little bit of a detour here from what we normally do on Monday Musings and turn it into a Film Friday segment because I'm so excited being a running nerd. The play concept there. This was what one of my coaching buddies back at Indianapolis calls a dummy trap. And what is meant by that is you have both players. It looks like they're both guards are going to be trapping, but really it is a read play for the backside guard. If the unblocked defensive tackle catches on quickly off the snap and realizes, oh, nobody's blocking me and doesn't penetrate, then it turns into a full block. And the guard is just going up, almost like power is going to be trying to get downhill on the defensive tackle. If the defensive tackle penetrates, which is what the Seahawks are hoping he's going to do, and that's what happened on the play yesterday, then it's a kick out, almost like a kick out on a power block on a trap play. And they did that with both their guards. They left both the defenders, I believe it was Baron Browning, who was on the outside, and they left him completely unblocked as well. And the play side guard kicked him out, and Anthony Bradford knocked him out of the picture. It was well blocked. We got to see Cody Barton get a very rude homecoming from Charles Cross, who pancaked him at the second level and knocked him down to the turf. It was extremely well blocked. There was one defender that had a chance to get Ken Walker the third down, and Alex Singleton couldn't do it. Ken Walker 101 ended up winning there. I just love the schematic stuff that the Seahawks did, going to some of these gap schemes. The 15-yard run they had earlier on that drive, it was a traditional power play, and watching Laken Tomlinson rumble his way to the second level and smash somebody, open up a seam for Ken Walker third to get the big yardage. It seemed like Ryan Grubb was able to find some schemes, some concepts that really worked with the personnel he had. And then you started to see everything else work. You get a couple positive plays, and suddenly the pass protection started getting better. Everybody started to play at a higher level because of that. And that is the immense value that is brought by being able to, on the fly, adapt the way that Ryan Grubb did there. And honestly, we just haven't seen it the last few years. Third quarters have been really rough for this offense traditionally because they haven't been able to adjust to things. That was not the case in yesterday's game at all.
Yeah, that is one of the most encouraging things that I took away from the game. Another one was just the consistency of the tackling. And we talked before about the safeties. I thought that they really made some just hugely impactful hits, but that was the thing that I was excited about is this looked like the same defense that I saw Mike McDonald running in the Baltimore Ravens a year ago when they thumped Seattle. And I mentioned that because, again, it was the accountability accountability. It was the sure physical tackling. I mean, time and time again, Bo Nix would throw the ball out to a back or to a receiver, and before that pass catcher had the opportunity to even turn around, he was already being knocked to the turf. I mean, there was a handful of plays where they were able to kind of spin off of contact, but even when that happened, there were a whole flock of other Seahawks that were right there to take that ball carrier down to the field. So, again, I say this with all due respect to head coach and Pete Carroll, that I believe deserves to go to the Hall of Fame someday. But it did feel like the Seahawks were missing a lot of tackles, and there were a lot of times when they were giving up place and space where their linebackers and their safeties were kind of looking at each other like, what the heck just happened? Where were you? Where am I supposed to be? There were just miscommunication. To see how often Seattle was sending blitzers from unexpected directions and yet still were in perfect position when the quarterback was able to get the ball out. Again, very encouraging sign that Mike McDonald's defense is just getting started, and it already looks like one of the more fearsome in all of the league.
That really is perfect segue into my Monday musing on the defensive side of the football. The tackling, the communication, to me, it starts with the safeties, and I already gushed about Rayshon Jenkins and Kayvon Wallace earlier, but let's give Julian Love his love, because Julian Love, to me, was one of the best players on the field for either team yesterday. The ability to get downhill and blow up a number of plays. We obviously saw the end zone interception, the 1 yard line interception. There was nothing he could have done there. It was not one where he ran out of the end zone and then got stopped at the 1 yard line. He literally picked it at the 1 yard line. It's just how it happened. You'll take that interception every time so you can keep the Broncos from scoring points. Unfortunately, they got a safety the very next play and gave them 2 points, almost gave them a field goal back. But nonetheless, Julian Love was making plays all over the field as a tackler. He was getting downhill. He was blowing up screens. He was helping the run game. They blitzed him a couple times, had the interception. Rayshon Jenkins is smacking people. Kayvon Wallace forces a fumble, looking like Charles Tillman out there. Peanut punch, baby, making plays. And it was just really exciting to see the way those guys played. So my Monday musing on defense is I would play the 3 safeties look just as much as the 3 cornerback look. If Devin Witherspoon's going to be playing on the outside, hey, Kayvon Wallace can play some slot, play some big nickel. There are going to be opponents where they're going to do that more. Wallace only played 12 snaps yesterday, but it felt like more because every time he was in, he made impact plays and was where he needed to be. The communication that all 3 of those guys are having that is rubbing off in the entire rest of this defense, that has just not been there the last couple of years for the Seahawks defense. So it's an exciting development. There's no question about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really quickly, I know we're up against the clock here, but I got to kind of mention this as far as a Monday musing. Look, I have gushed about the potential of the return man, D. Williams, and I cannot imagine an uglier debut for D than what he went through. Obviously, the muff punt, the 9 yard line that gave the Broncos yet another opportunity to score. The lack of aggression, frankly, I thought there were several opportunities where he had to return a kick, return a punt, especially where it felt like he could have taken it and chose not to. Look, I got to give him credit. I mean, after the muff punt, the biggest priority now is just to make sure that you secure the football. And of course, he did that the rest of the game, but it was disappointing. I was disappointed also on the coverage units that were protecting D. Williams. The Denver Gunners were absolutely terrific in this game. And so that's something that Seattle has to improve upon. Seattle went from Tariq Woolen to Devin Witherspoon to Nehemiah Pritchett on the outside, and none of them, frankly, played as well as I think that Seattle needs to have if they are going to be able to have the dynamic return game that I think that they will in the future. Again, though, what I'm chalking this up to is a rookie and some inexperience at the outside there that I do think that it's going to get better as the season moves on.
My parting words here, because you just said everything eloquently about D. Williams. It was unfortunate, but look, first game, undrafted rookie. There's some other things they got to clean up there on their punt return team. They will get that done. Jay Harbaugh is going to get that done going into next week. But my parting words, look, I don't want to say that I'm quoting Aaron Rodgers because I know how that makes Seahawks fans feel, but RELAX when it comes to the passing game. You need to relax. Things are going to be fine. Tyler Lockett still had a really solid game yesterday. DK isn't going to be playing against Pat Surtain II every single week. Very good player. Mm-hmm. There's going to be plenty of downfield plays, so don't let 1 week completely ruin your viewpoint of the passing game. The Seahawks are going to be A-okay with their passing attack as they get ready for week 2 against New England and the rest of the 2024 schedule. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, Tell the Truth Tuesday returns. We're going to have some words of wisdom coming out of the opener, putting a bow on it, and start looking towards the New England Patriots, the 1-0 New England Patriots, who will be hosting the Seahawks next week. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.